So this week's Parshas Kisavai, and Kisavai means when you will come, and it opens up talking about mitzvahs that we have to keep, or speaking to the Jewish people in the desert as we were about to enter the land of Israel. Talking about letting us know about mitzvahs, things that we have to do once we get into the land of Israel and begin to live this agricultural life, farming the land, producing crops, produce, etc. And so the first mitzvah it talks about is the mitzvah of Bikurim, aka first fruit. And this mitzvah is, in short, that at the beginning of a season, it is the responsibility of the farmer to keep track of which are the first fruits in any given variety to ripen, and to then take those fruits once they're ready and to bring them to the Beis Hamikdash, to give them to the Kohen. And there are some things that they would say. And Bikurim was a sacrifice of sorts, as something that the person is taking from their produce and bringing it and giving it up in the Beis Hamikdash. But it didn't go on the Mizbeach, it didn't go anywhere, well, I shouldn't say anywhere near the Mizbeach. The procedure of some of it was next to the Mizbeach, but none of it was burnt. The Bikurim was brought to the Beis Hamikdash and given to the Kohen for the Kohen to use for personal benefit, to eat, to enjoy. That's the mitzvah of Bikurim. Now, it's not unreasonable that a person who just take a step back for a minute and think about what life looked like for a farmer. Even today, it's hard work. But once upon a time, there were the closest thing they had to a machine was maybe, a hoe, some sort of a metal blade that they could strap onto the back of a cow or a horse or something to hoe the land. But it was brutal. There were no machines to come and to dig and to sow the seeds and to harvest the crop and all these things. I wouldn't be surprised if today you could do it almost all from the kitchen table with, automated machines, and you have an app on your phone and you can just tell it what to do, when to start, when to stop. I wouldn't be surprised if that's already the case. But once upon a time, being a farmer, working in agriculture meant that you had to be out doing grueling, extremely physically demanding physical labor, basically all day, every day. If a person decided that they needed a day off, the day off was going to come at the expense of their crop and their produce and what they were going to have to show at the end of it. The rain's not waiting for anyone, the sun's not waiting for anyone, and it was really, really, really hard work. So this person who, for the past however many months, in order for this crop to be where it's at now, was out working from sunrise until sunset every single day, hard physical labor all day, every day. Now finally, they have some crops that are becoming ready, they're about to be ripe, and the mitzvah is not to bring some of the crops to the Beis Hamikdash. It's very specific. It's to bring the first crops, or the first fruits to ripen from the crop. It's the mitzvah of the first fruit. And they would have to go out and, how do you know which fruits were the first to ripen? Once they're ripen, you can't tell, did this one started ripening a day earlier than that one? Once they're ripe, they all look the same. They had to keep track, and they had to go out on a regular basis consistently before the crops started to ripen and keep an eye out. And as soon as they saw some fruits, some specimens that were starting to ripen, they would tie a string around those fruits so that once they were fully ripened, they would know these were the first ones to ripen and these are the ones to bring to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, a person who worked that hard to produce these crops might start to wonder, and it's not an unreasonable thing to wonder necessarily, and we'll get to the correctness versus incorrectness of it, etc., and maybe a little bit more subtlety in terms of how reasonable or unreasonable it is. But all things considered, for a human being with the human condition who did all of that work, one could understand if they start to wonder, look, yes, I'm going to bring some of it to the Beis HaMikdash, I'm going to give it to the Kohen, but like the first ones, like I can't just like take one bite, enjoy a few pieces of fruit, enjoy a few bits of this crop that I worked, and then I'll like bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. No, it has to be the first ones. And maybe that can seem like a bit of a little harsh, a little more demanding than necessary maybe. Now the idea, just very briefly, of giving it to the Kohen, how is giving it to the Kohen at sacrifice? It's just giving it to another person. Keep in mind that the Kohanim, the tribe of Levi in general, and Kohanim, their role in the community was to be the spiritual representatives of the Jewish community at large in the Beis HaMikdash, to do all the things that had to be done in the Beis HaMikdash. They didn't own land the same way that everyone else did. They didn't have the same means of producing physical goods, of producing agriculture the same way that the broader community did. And it's a partnership. The reason they didn't have the opportunity to produce and to earn the same way everyone else did was because doing that would come at the expense of their ability to be fully committed and focused on the spirituality, on their role as the spiritual representatives of the community in the Beis HaMikdash. So things are set up, Hashem set things up in a way that they did not have to be involved in agriculture, in that hard work. They were able to be free to focus on the spiritual, which meant that they were then in a position to be the spiritual representatives of the broader community. And in response for that, the flip side of that is that the community financially supported the Kohanim, the Leviim, in exchange for the role that they were filling to represent the community. Right? It's anything in life, if there's someone who has something and we want it, or we want some of what they have, or we want someone to do something for us, generally the way it works is you need to provide something for that person in exchange that's going to justify them giving us the thing that we want or doing the service for us that we want them to do. And it makes sense because everybody needs things, and the person who's giving something, giving their time, giving their effort, giving their goods to us needs something in exchange so that they can have what they need. Right? This is the way that Hashem created the world, for it to work this way. Now, Kohanim and Leviim can't just study and pray and meditate and focus on spirituality and come to the Beis HaMikdash and do all of this, service and be the spiritual representatives, and that's the end of it, because how are they going to feed their kids? How are they going to, have a roof over their heads? How are they going to feed themselves? And so it's understood in every community there are roles, there are, let's say, and without getting into all of the ancillary things that this could devolve into, there is such a thing as let's call it a public servant, as someone who has a role that they are doing something for the community, that the community as a whole needs. It's a need that the community has. This person is filling that role. They are a public servant. They are serving the public, the community. But you can't often be an effective public servant if you also have to run a business or have a job at the same time to support yourself. So the idea is that the public supports a public servant so that the public servant can do the thing that the public needs. Right? So this is the idea. Kohanim were not farmers. They didn't have land in the same way that everyone else did. They were focused on the spirituality. So when someone would take some of their crops and bring it to the Beis HaMikdash and give it to the Kohen, what that's doing is saying, I am taking something that's mine and giving it away to support the person who is focused on spirituality, the person who's focused on at the front lines of the spirituality, etc., of us as a community. So it's a sacrifice of sorts. It's bringing it to directly support the spiritual service of Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. And yes, it's everybody, understands that we could look at it even just from a very pragmatic economic perspective. If we want to have people who are doing things on our behalf, if we want to have public servants, the public has to support them, or there aren't going to be public servants, either because they're going to quit or they're not going to be there anymore if they don't eat eventually. So yes, we have to take some of our stuff and support these people who are representing us in the Beis HaMikdash instead of having their own farm and producing their own goods, etc. But does it really have to be the first fruit? I have to keep an eye out, and the first fruit to ripen I have to bring to the Beis HaMikdash. I have to give it to the Kohen. I have to give it as a sacrifice to the Kohen on behalf of Hashem, ultimately on behalf of the Creator. Why does it have to be the first one? Now, I don't think anyone would have a hard time understanding that maybe a human, king, monarch, government might do something like that because they're human, and all of us are to varying degrees substantially self-centered, and the king has the power to say, I want the first one, and deal with it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Hashem. We're talking about Torah. Everything is true and real and has a meaning. So why does Hashem obligate us to take the first fruits, the first, best, most appealing fruits out of the whole season, and those have to go to Hashem. Those have to be sacrificed. The truth is that whilst on one hand it's not unreasonable that a person might feel that way and wonder if, is this a little bit harsh, a little bit more than necessary? Let me have the first ones, I'll bring the second ones, I'll bring the third ones. The thought itself comes from a very, very mistaken perspective. So it is based on a big mistake, on a big error, let's say. But it's perfectly understandable and reasonable that human beings are going to make this error. Right? So sometimes someone will make a mistake and you'll just be like, hello, what were you thinking? What was I thinking? How could... Yes, there are such mistakes, but there are also mistakes that are reasonable to make. Doesn't make them less wrong, doesn't make them less mistaken. Right? Why do we have, research and statistical analysis of data when we do research to try and figure something out scientifically? The reason is because there might be multiple possibilities that all seem reasonable, and all of them are things that we could explain and justify. We just don't know which one is actually the way it plays out in reality, and the only way to find out is to test it. So you test, and then once you test, you have to collect the data, and the more data, the better. And then you do a statistical analysis of the data, and then you know yes or no. The fact that data indicate clearly that let's say a hypothesis, a suggestion, an idea was very wrong doesn't necessarily mean it was an unreasonable suggestion to make. There can be things that are incorrect but not unreasonable. And here I would say this is an example of that, where for a person to think, well, why can't I keep the first one, I'll give the second and third to Hashem. Why do I have to give the first one? Now, first of all, that could be partly emotional, which is a whole separate thing, because a response to an emotion generally is not an explanation. An effective response to an emotion is generally not an explanation. I just feel like I now have to be responsible to clarify that, what I mean by that. An effective response to an emotion that is here in the present is not an explanation. That's not the role of an emotion. That being said, an explanation in the future can be very, very effective at influencing future emotions that are going to show up after the explanation. So explanations, understanding, learning, there's a whole idea of Chabad, is very, very functional and important and can have a very strong impact on the development of our emotions going forward, but it's not an effective way to address an emotion in the present. So, this claim, this complaint, let's call it, could be an emotional thing where it's not the answer. But let's say coming at it academically, discussing the idea, because a person could argue not emotionally and say, like, how much did this person work? How hard did they work? Literally, today when a person says, I put my sweat, blood and tears into this, it's almost always figuratively. These people put their literal sweat, blood, and tears into producing these crops all day, every day. And a person who's not emotionally invested could look from the outside and say, I don't understand why they have to give the first ones, let them give the second ones. The thing that is missing here is, just one thing before we get there is, every part of that claim is technically accurate. Well, not the claim itself, but the argument behind the claim. This person worked day and night, put in sweat, blood, and tears from sunrise to sunset, all day, every day, for months on end to produce these crops. Fact. Accurate statement. Whether or not that therefore justifies something is not a statement of fact. That's an argument. It's a separate thing. But no one is denying that, yeah, you know what, this person worked really, 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 really hard. And most people are not going to suggest, or most people are going to appreciate and agree, you know, maybe in varying degrees and levels, etc., that it kind of makes sense that this person should get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. All of that is true. But there's something very important missing. I want to illustrate. Imagine that this classroom was a scene in a novel. And the opening, someone opens the novel and they start reading the opening, page. And the author is describing the scene, and they say that there was this classroom and, the walls were painted green. And there were amazing, brilliant students sitting facing the front of the room. And at the front of the room, there was a man with a beard, and he was talking. And approximately 1 foot in front of his face, about, let's say, 5 feet and change above the ground, there was a green highlighter. If you were to read that description, would you have an accurate picture of what you see in front of your eyes now? What's missing? Bingo. That description, most likely you are going to visualize the marker hovering in front of my face. It's not. So 2 things are true here at the same time. Every single word of that description was accurate. There was nothing inaccurate or untrue in that description. It's also true that there was a very, very important piece of information missing, and without that missing piece of information, the picture that we create, that we visualize, is grossly inaccurate. Not because anything about the description was true, but there was very important information missing. Now, assuming that this is a non-fiction book, it's not a fantasy book, there's no magic involved, it's just a regular old, either non-fiction or maybe fiction, but not fantasy, not sci-fi. A person reading that description is going to immediately ask themselves, hang on, how is the marker in front of his face? Was he holding it? Was it hanging on a string? Whatever it is, they're going to wonder that. And why are they going to wonder that? Why are they going to know there's a piece of information missing? Because there's no way that a marker just stays in front of my face over here by itself, right? If there's not something holding it up, whether it's a string tied to the ceiling or my hand holding it, it's not going to be there. It's going to fall. It's not the way things work. Now, if someone either doesn't know whether or not this is a sci-fi or a fantasy book, or they just maybe were born today as an adult able to read and they have no idea how anything works, they might just picture the marker in front of my face floating in the air. Like, okay, that's what it said, that's what it is. Didn't say floating, but it said it was there without any other information. This is kind of what our perspective of our environment is like. Is there a desk here? Yes, there's a desk. Is there a green marker here? Yes. Is every one of us here? Yes. Presumably, unless it's a simulation or whatever. All the things we see around us are real, and to describe them can be very accurate. But to say there is a white desk here whilst accurate, is missing very important information. That, or at least some of that very important information is, there is a, so now, in that description of that scene, let's say you could describe it and say there was a marker in front of his face, or you could say there was a marker in front of his face being held up there by his hand. Both equally correct. One is much more complete and going to produce a much more accurate picture of reality. We could say there is a desk here, accurate. Or we could say there is a desk here that is here right now because there is a divine creative force that is making it exist for a reason. That is a much more complete statement of truth. Now, there's a reason why most people are going to say the first one and not the second one. Several reasons, a whole bunch of reasons perhaps. A big part of it is that we relate to that which we see, which we hear, which we feel, which we taste, which we smell. We relate to the tangible, we relate to the material. And Hashem created us that way intentionally. So we can see the desk. We can't see the divine creative force that's making the desk exist, not because it's invisible, but because it's not a physical phenomenon. It's not a physical entity. Our eyes don't see things that aren't physical. So it makes sense that when we look at the desk, we don't see the divine creative force that's making it exist. We don't see the purpose in it. We don't see the reason that it exists. We don't see the fact that if this exists, there is absolutely, incontrovertibly, something that's making it exist, and that is a divine creative force of God. There's nothing incorrect about just saying, this is a white desk, the white desk is here, whatever you want to say, but there's important information missing, and we're going to create an inaccurate picture in our minds. Because we're going to see a desk, someone says there is a desk here, this is a desk, the picture that it's going to produce for most people is a desk, and it exists. Period. That is inaccurate. There is a desk here that exists because there is a divine creative force making it exist. Now, it's not unreasonable that an average person is not going to see that in everything they look at. An average person is not naturally going to look around and everything they see, they're going to see in their mind's eye the fact that there's a divine creative force that makes it exist and there's a purpose and it exists for a reason, etc. Because if there was no divine creative force making it exist, it wouldn't be here. Most of us don't see things that way naturally. It's our job to learn and to process and to integrate and internalize that which we learn so that we can get there to whatever degree we can, and there's no there, there's only in that direction, and we try to keep moving in that direction as much as we can. But it's very natural to look at a desk and see a desk. It's very natural for the person who put in sweat, blood, and tears for 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week for months to produce these fruits, to look at the fruits and see the fruits of their labor. It's reasonable, but it's not accurate. The person wouldn't exist themselves, the farmer wouldn't exist if Hashem wasn't making them exist actively in every single moment in time. The land that they're farming wouldn't exist if Hashem wasn't actively making it exist in every moment in time. The seeds that they planted wouldn't have been there, or the kernels wouldn't have been there. The rain wouldn't have fallen. And maybe they did active irrigation. The water that they used to irrigate with wouldn't have been there if Hashem didn't actively make it be there for every moment of that time. The nature of crops wouldn't be that you just put them in the ground and they just, with all the right hard work, etc., they sprout and grow into new produce if Hashem wasn't making that be the case actively at every point in time. So yes, this person put in a lot of hard work. But everything from the materials they're using to them themselves, to the ability to do the work, to the concept, the fact that work even exists, and the fact that time and space even exist, all of this comes back to Hashem actively making it exist and be so at every moment in time. Now, for the person who has a deep conscious clarity of that perspective, of the full picture, of the complete description, all of a sudden the thought, well, oh, come on, do I really have to give the first one to Hashem? It's like, hang on, what? That doesn't make any sense at all. You wouldn't be here if not for Hashem. There wouldn't be produce if not for Hashem. There wouldn't be earth to farm if not for Hashem, or water, or anything. And so one of the things that the mitzvah of Bikurim does is it's this reminder, this push that reminds us to refresh that clarity. It's a reminder that everything we do, everywhere we go, everything we see, ourselves, our environment, the universe, everything in it, everything that exists, everything that happens, all of that is because Hashem is making it be so actively right now. And whilst it doesn't take away from anything in terms of, let's say, what would be an incomplete description, that there's time and there's space and there's a universe and there's me and there's the earth and there's all of these things, all of those things are true. But when we have the full picture, a complete description, as opposed to an incomplete description, it changes our perception drastically, and it's going to change our experience of all of those things drastically. And it's going to change our response drastically. So now the issue is not so much that, understanding now what was the mistake, what was the error in this, let's say, claim or, question of, really, does it have to be the first one? Whereas, let's say a person who's, feeling very strong and yes, Hashem says so, the Torah says so, how could you ask that? The response there that a person might feel when they hear someone, ask this question might be one of, criticism, of judgment, like, what do you mean? Hashem's the creator, Hashem's God, Hashem said so. Like, what you think, Now, obviously, that's hopefully a response that most people are not going to feel most of the time, but it could happen. Once we understand what is the actual mistake that they're making, when we hear someone ask a question like that, the response is not going to be, oh, how dare you? The response is going to be, oh my goodness, you poor thing, you're missing so much information here. Like, there's so much more to this, and maybe the next part of that thought is, what can I do to open your eyes and help make your life so much deeper and richer and more complex and fulfilling? Because that's ultimately what this is. It's just missing all the stuff that's beneath the surface, all the stuff that's not tangible. And all those things that are not tangible and beneath the surface, those are the point of everything. That's where things come from and how and why they're here and what they're here for, and what the meaning of everything, the purpose of everything, the ultimate value of everything. So Bikurim comes along, and it's a mitzvah that the farmers will do every year, and we learn it in the Torah every year to remind ourselves, don't lose the forest for the trees. Don't forget about all the things that you can't hear, see, feel, taste, and smell. Not because then you're going to be a bad person. I mean, some people might say yes, but I'm not. But because you're going to be missing out on so much. You're going to be missing out on... Now, just a tangent here. Well, it's not really a tangent, but a side note. Some people, you could argue this from two very different directions. One is that it's actually incorrect. Like, Hashem really is making everything be, exist and be the way it is, etc., etc. And like, if you don't know that, you're missing out. You could have, and I mean, I've heard this argument along these lines in a bit of a different context being made by a evolutionary biologist about religion. It was a fascinating debate between two brilliant evolutionary biologists about religion, and one of them who's, very well known, very famous evolutionary biologist or scientist. Evolutionist, maybe we'd call him, considering whatever. He has a long-established history of describing religion as being a mind virus and being this like ridiculous thing. And he was up on stage debating another evolutionary biologist who happens to be Jewish, like completely secular and atheist, incredibly brilliant and a much deeper thinker, clearly. And his response was, how can you, as an evolutionary biologist, suggest that religion is a mind virus and a negative thing, and it makes no sense? All of humanity, for all of human history, almost without exception, if you zoom out and look at the whole picture, has always been religious. If religion was a negative thing, it would have been selected out a long time ago. So as an atheist evolutionary biologist, you have to argue that evolution has, that religion has a very, very strong benefit that it brings to surviving and to thriving, etc., which is why it has always been selected for among all of humanity, for all of human history, especially if you're going to argue that humanity is hundreds of thousands of years old. And for all of that time, throughout all the stages of our development, we've always, almost all been religious. What that means is that the people who weren't religious didn't survive and thrive and you know, give their legacy into the future the same way that the people who were religious did. So he himself doesn't believe that religion is true, but you can't, as an evolutionary biologist, argue that it's a negative thing. Clearly, it's been very strongly selected for. There aren't many things that have been selected for more strongly than religion, certainly not socially. Right? So even just at a similar angle, from a very practical, pragmatic view, it's just very healthy to feel a sense of purpose and meaning in every part of life, to have an awareness and appreciation for the fact that there's more to life than what we see, there's more to our experience than what we see, there's more to our challenges than what we see, there's more to our successes than what we see. We are a part of something infinitely greater than ourselves. Even if it were not true, it would still be very beneficial. Certainly, if it's true, it's beneficial and it's the truth. So we have this mitzvah that comes along every year and reminds us, you may be working hard and all of those things are true, and no one serious and well-informed would try to argue otherwise. But there is also more to the picture, which is all the things behind that that put you in a position to be able to do this. So yes, you worked hard as a person that Hashem is making exist, and with the abilities that Hashem gave you and continues to give you and to make you have, in a world that Hashem created and continues to make be real. It doesn't take away from your hard work, but it means it's not just your hard work. Your hard work is happening in a framework or a platform that is here because Hashem's making it be here for your hard work to happen in it, as well as the person doing the hard work, etc. And the point of this is not as a reprimand that you have to remember this, etc. It's there as a reminder for our benefit. I just want to clarify again because I feel like that could be misconstrued. When I say it's not there as a reprimand, I don't mean that it's all reprimand means like to tell someone off, to criticize. It doesn't mean all things are equally good and correct and everybody can do whatever they want and this is just a suggestion. That's not what I'm saying. We also do have a halachic obligation to have emunah, to believe in Hashem and all of these things. But the primary value here, still, on thin ice, and that's probably not correct, but a primary value here is also what it brings to our lives. And the truth is that the second thing we're going to go on to talk about now is going to actually maybe reduce the need for that disclaimer somewhat. So that's number one thing that Bikurim is not just a historical thing that was speaking to them then and we read it now because we have to read the Parsha every week. This is speaking very loudly and clearly to every one of us today and will be for all of time. The second thing is, what did they do with the Bikurim? They brought it to the Beis HaMikdash and gave it to the Kohen who would eat it, enjoy it. And the Kohen is supposed to eat it and supposed to enjoy it. And you're supposed to bring him the most premium specimens from the crop. The best, the most tasty, the most nutritious, the first things that showed up before any of the, the nutrients in the ground were depleted. we're giving the kohen the best, so that and they are supposed to take it home and eat those best fruits that we had and enjoy them. Enjoy the fact that they're the best fruits.
Did the Kohen needs to also separate the part of this bikur to Hashem before they take it home?
That's a really good question. The answer is no, but that itself is going to tie into exactly what we're saying now. And Bikurim is considered a sacrifice to Hashem. Now, without getting into all the obvious complexity of the fact that humans are human, and maybe there are some people who are not Kohanim who behave better and are more in touch and spiritually connected, etc., than some Kohanim, and maybe some Kohanim are very much not the way that they should be. That's always going to be the case of everything. But if we think about the role that Kohanim, the role of a Kohen and what they represent as a group, a Kohen represents, or what Kohanim are, at least conceptually and representatively, is the people who are not out working the field, they're not out negotiating business deals, they spend their time davening, praying, studying, learning, connecting, and serving in the Beis HaMikdash, serving in the temple to Hashem. Their role is to be focused on the spiritual. And Rambam actually at the end of all of these halachas says that everything we're talking about here, we talk about Kohanim, about Levim. Anybody can be a Kohen figuratively. Anybody can choose to say, you know what, my life is dedicated to spirituality. I am not going to be materialistic. I am not here to pursue, material things. I'm dedicated to spirituality. That is a very noble thing when it is done correctly and in a way that's healthy and constructive. And that is exactly what we're going to see now in the mitzvah itself. When someone is a kohen, when someone has the realization of their purpose as their primary value, the integration of divinity into the world as their primary value, the fulfillment of the purpose of all existence as their primary value, serving Hashem, living a Torah true life as their primary value, that doesn't mean they don't ever do anything else. It can't, because a person who doesn't eat isn't going to be around to do that for very long. A person who doesn't sleep isn't going to be around to do that for very long. There are lots of different things that we have to do. And this mitzvah here gives us such an important and, I would say, so widely forgotten and underappreciated part of this picture. And that is that to be doing this properly in the best way possible doesn't mean make sure you get enough sleep that you don't die, make sure you eat enough food that you don't die, make sure you drink enough water that you don't die, so that you can use every other bit of your time for just learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. It doesn't even mean just get enough sleep to be physically healthy and eat enough food to be physically healthy and do enough exercise to be physically healthy and thriving. Even that is not, that's already obviously a much healthier picture, but it's not just that. Hashem designed us. Hashem designed us precisely and intentionally, and there is no part of us that isn't here for a reason. The part of us that enjoys certain things, and for different ones of us, they're going to be different things that we specifically enjoy the most, is part of us, and it's supposed to be here, and it's here for a reason. To destroy that, to damage that, for a person to say, I really, 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 really want this thing, but I'm not going to allow myself to have it because spirituality. Apparently that's not the way Hashem sees things. Hashem said, take the best fruit, give it to the Kohen so he can go home and eat it and enjoy it. That's the mitzvah. If someone is a Kohen, then taking the best, first, ripest, most flavorful and juicy and appealing fruits from the crop and taking them home and making a bracha and eating them and enjoying them. If someone is a kohen, that is part of serving Hashem. If the person is doing that because it's part of their service to Hashem, then they are serving Hashem. Right now, this is something that becomes a little bit, complex to put all of that together. I would say nuanced, even though I have a hard time with that word because of the extent to which it became a cliche. In that people will say, well, if you're really, really serving Hashem, then you wouldn't be so interested in how good the food tastes. You would be more interested in just like getting your nutrients and then going to daven, going to pray, going to study, going to help people, going to do mitzvahs, etc. And again, this is a mistake that is probably often made coming from a virtuously intended, well-intended place, but it doesn't make it any less mistaken. The person who wakes up in the morning and says, how can I do what Hashem wants of me today? How can I? Right now, every one of us is here. Every one of us exists. That means that clearly, everyone else in the world, aside from us, would not be sufficient to produce the outcome that Hashem wants without us, or we wouldn't be here. Hashem doesn't waste. It's a sin to waste. If Hashem is right now making every one of us be here, that means every one of us has something that Hashem needs from us, wants from us for the world, for His purpose. Every one of us has different things that we enjoy, different things that make us feel fulfilled, satisfied, healthy, etc. And it's not just about sleep and nutrients and exercise. Those are definitely the pillars of physical health.
What is it about watching movies? That sounds amazing.
Okay, so now you're already jumping right to the end and getting into the, the great, I would say the very specifics in there. Honestly, I would say that that's going to vary from person to person, right? There's a concept that we talk about, iskafia. Iskafia means resisting things that we want to do, right? And it's a very, very big idea in Chassidus, in Chabad Chassidus, the idea of iskafia. Which means that, that ice cream looks really good. I'm not going to eat that ice cream just because I want to express my divine soul rather than just be the human animal. That's a very, very valuable thing when it's done healthily. I would suggest, and I would suggest this very strongly, that if someone's sitting there and saying, I want the ice cream, come on, I want the ice cream, I'm not going to have it, yes, have it, no, have it, I really want it, I'm not going to have it, I really want it, I'm not going to have it. They don't eat the ice cream. The rest of the day, they don't even realize, but they're in a bad mood because that part of them that wanted the ice cream is still there and it's still upset that it didn't get the ice cream. And then for the rest of their life, every time they see ice cream, there's a whole battle that comes up because that original issue with the ice cream was never resolved. And now they have this thing that they're dealing with, or even if not, but the bottom line is that part of them got, let's say, hurt. And that might sound a little bit extreme, but it's not necessarily. Then I would suggest that not eating that ice cream is not correct iskafia. It is a person doing something that the mitzvah of Bikurim clearly tells us you should not do. If a person is sitting there and they say, you know what, oh, that ice cream looks really good, I really feel like having some of that ice cream. And then they say, you know what, like, life is about spirituality, about serving Hashem, not really about like ice cream because like it's going to give me a sensation in my taste buds, whoop-de-doo. Both of those things are true. The correct healthy synthesis of that for the person who really, really, really wants the ice cream would be, you know what? I am in general like doing my best to bring all of me into the picture to serve Hashem, to do what I can in the world. And eating this ice cream is I'm going to really enjoy it. I'm going to walk away feeling good. I'm going to walk away feeling energized. And you know what? There's no halacha that says I can't enjoy the ice cream, and I'm going to just be a happier, healthier, more motivated, more positive person for the rest of the day. Eat the ice cream. You're hurting Hashem's interest by not eating the ice cream if you're going to be hurting yourself by doing that. Right? So Does that mean that iskafia doesn't exist? Of course it exists. For the person who says, oh, that ice cream looks so good. And then they say, you know what, do I really need the ice cream? Like, it looks really good. I know when I eat it, I'll enjoy it. But like, could I try to focus on thinking about, higher, deeper, more spiritual things? And once I do, I'll realize that the ice cream is really not that valuable and I really don't need it or want it so much anymore. If a person is up to doing that, go for it. That's healthy iskafia. I really want the ice cream. You know what? There's more to life than ice cream. Yeah, okay. That's healthy iskafia. I want the ice cream, I shouldn't have it. I want the ice cream, I shouldn't have it. The person who does that and doesn't eat the ice cream, I would say is 99 times out of 100 hurting themselves and hurting Hashem's interest. And it's not the way the life is supposed to be lived. We are not supposed to be making ourselves less healthy. We're not supposed to be making ourselves less able to be energized and vibrant and motivated and to enjoy serving Hashem in the world because we're busy making sure that we don't allow ourselves to enjoy anything. That doesn't help anyone, it doesn't help anything. Now, that mistake is one, again, that I would say that is made usually with the best of intentions, but it's a big mistake. And this is what the mitzvah of Bikurim is coming to tell us. You can be a Kohen, and if as a Kohen, as a person who is focused on spirituality, focused on serving Hashem, focused on doing with the world what Hashem brought us here to do, as a Kohen, they can enjoy the fruit. As a Kohen, I can say, this piece of fruit looks delicious. This piece of ice cream looks delicious. This steak looks delicious. This salad, I really, you know what? It's beautiful outside right now. I want to just go and sit outside, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the sun, close my eyes and just be present and enjoy that for a few minutes. The person who does those things, not because, a person obviously can say, oh my goodness, that steak, that ice cream, that whatever it is looks amazing. I really, really want it. It's going to taste so good. Yeah, that, sounds like that might be somewhat materialistic. For the person who says, you know what, I would really enjoy this food, this activity right now, and I think it would be good for me and I'd come out as a healthier, more energized person on the other side of it, and I'm going to do that because that's going to help me to serve Hashem. They are enjoying the food as a Kohen. Now, do they enjoy material taste, material sensations, the material sensation of the radiance of the sun on their skin, of the feeling of the breeze on their skin? Yes, they are. Those are physical, material things, but they're not being materialistic. They're not doing it because they want the material ends. They're doing it because they want to serve Hashem, and they know that at the end of the day, I'm a human being. Hashem designed us this way because He wants us to be this way. Hashem wants us to benefit from experiencing these things in a way that is going to contribute to us. If we were all supposed to just be drones and to say the same things and do the same things and maybe with some variation, but we weren't, Hashem would have opened a drone factory and created 8 billion drones, and He didn't. Every single one of us has different genes, different fingerprints, different personality, different mind, different emotional profile. And Hashem did that because He wants us to have that. That's supposed to be part of the picture. Every one of us enjoys different things. Every one of us is going to have our best day if we start off the day a little differently, if there are different things that we give to ourselves if we need them. And Hashem set things up that way because that's what He wants. That makes it dynamic, that makes it interesting, and that makes it healthy. And the mitzvah of Bikurim says, if you're giving the fruits to the Kohen, and he's enjoying them as a Kohen, that's the best, that's the ultimate. Hashem wants you to give the Kohen the best fruit. Who else better to enjoy the tastiest fruit than the person who's doing it with the intent of bringing that into their service of Hashem, of bringing that into their mission to make the world a better place, to bring divinity into the world. There's no possible better outcome than that for this good food. What, throw it in the garbage? Yeah, that's called wasting. Now, obviously, just disclaimer, if someone has food on their plate or in front of them that is not going to be good for them to eat either because it's unhealthy food or they ate enough, then to say, I'm going to eat it because I don't want to throw it out, I don't want to waste, that's not called salvaging waste. That's called wasting and hurting oneself. So just side note. I know it's a very common thing people do. Oh, I don't want to waste it. Okay, I'll eat it. If I would have been better off not eating it, then it would have been better to throw it in the garbage. It's a bigger waste to hurt someone with it than to just put it in the garbage. Here it's gone and it made things worse. But the point of the mitzvah is, here this message is, Hashem created us with different interests and different things that we enjoy and created those things for a reason. And the thing here that some people have a hard time with is, but we're not supposed to be materialistic. True, we're not talking about being materialistic. You know, and let's even say, you know, there's the person who wants to have the yacht because they want to have a yacht, whether they want to impress their friends or whatever it is. I would say that let's call that materialistic, you know, without having to be super precise about everything. Let's say that someone who, you know, because of maybe their culture, the things that they've been exposed to, their social circles, something they saw as a kid one time, whatever it is, they have a craving to have a yacht. And as much as they maybe wish to themselves, you know what, I wish I didn't need to crave this, I do. And a person can have that desire and also be very much dedicated and committed to serving Hashem and doing all the right things. And the person can simultaneously say, you know what, there's a part of me that wishes that I was better than feeling like I need to have this yacht, but I kind of do. And I can afford it. And as long as I don't have it, I'm going to be thinking about it and craving it and wanting to have it. And if I just get it and allow myself to enjoy it, it's going to put me in a position to better do all the other things. And then the person using that calculation goes and buys the yacht. That decision and that purchase and the enjoyment of the yacht is actually part of their service to Hashem. It's the kohen eating the delicious fruit. Now, that being said, obviously it's very, very easy for us to delude ourselves and to just excuse all the things we want. But for the person who cares and is trying to do the right thing, you know, unfortunately, fortunately, call it what we want, Hashem didn't make things as simple as just pursue spirituality, ignore all the physical things to the extent that you can, and that's the best. No. Hashem wants us to bring everything into our service of Hashem. Now, if we are in a place where we can not need the ice cream and not need the yacht and not need all the delicious things, and we are so deeply inspired and integrated and you know, spiritually evolved, let's say, that we can literally just, you know, daven and study Torah and do mitzvahs all day and really genuinely love it and be motivated and all of those things, that is a best case scenario, hypothetically. But that's clearly not supposed to be the case for everyone. Why? Because it's not. And if it was supposed to be, it would be. And most people are not realistically going to get that far ever in our lives. And so Hashem says with the mitzvah of Bikurim, be a kohen and enjoy the fruit. Do the things that are going to give you what you need to do this in the best way possible. Because when you do that, you're bringing all the parts of yourself into your service of Hashem. And Hashem created those parts for a reason. And when we bring them into the service of Hashem, we are fulfilling the purpose of those parts of ourselves, as opposed to locking them up in a closet and then they're getting wasted. That's making things worse, not better. Question?
Train themselves how to give the best to Hashem, or for the Kohanim to have the best food to better serve Hashem, or it's like for the both sections.
Right, it's two parts of the same mitzvah. It's both. They're both part of it.
And nowadays we're learning from the Kohanim how to.
From both, we're learning that to get the reminder and the clarity that at the end of the day everything is from Hashem, and so it makes sense. It's not unreasonable that we should give the first and the best to Hashem. And then the Kohen's part of the picture reminds us that, yeah, you can and should. If there's something that's going to make you do a better job of this, obviously if it's halachically allowed, then do it. And then you'll be bringing that part of yourself and that fruit and that steak and that salad and that sunlight and that breeze into Hashem and elevating it as well. Now, to go back to your question about, you know, let's say going to a movie or whatever it is, right? Things that maybe, you know, are not halachically prohibited, but a little bit gray. I have to be very careful about what I say. It's very, very, very individual specific. Now, again, multiple things can be true at the same time that are, and I think in a sense, maybe a good metaphor for this is chemotherapy. Right? Chemotherapy medication for for malignant tumors, for cancer, is, at least let's talk about it conceptually. Those medications are poisons, and they are terrible poisons that make people's lives painful, and they're terrible poisons. That's the long and short and simple truth of it. No one in their right mind would ever think that a healthy person should take any of those medications, because they're just going to make their life miserable and painful for no reason, aside from maybe being dangerous on top of that. So if you ask the question, should someone just randomly go and take these, let's call them medications? Obviously not. It's insane. They cause so much pain and suffering. Why would you do that? If someone is in a very specific situation in which the benefit is hopefully going to outweigh the negatives, because in this person's specific situation, the hope is that the poison is going to kill the cancer before it kills the person, and then the person can recover minus the cancer, that then made this potentially, thank you very much, hypothetically at least, a good idea. It's a poison, it's a bad thing, but for a specific person in specific circumstances, it might be the right thing to do. For a person who is, let's say, to make it a little bit less delicate and reduce the likelihood of me getting myself into really big trouble. A person, let's say, is coming from a background where, watching movies was a given, that it never occurred to them as a child or their parents or anyone around them that there's this thing that it's better not to watch movies, let's say. And now they've discovered this other part of life. They've discovered Torah and mitzvahs in a way that's making them feel like, I those things aren't really great for me. It's better not to. But there's a very big part of them that really, really wants to, and it's making everything a struggle. And at the end of the day, they're not getting out of bed the same way that they would be if they would just allow themselves to go to that movie once a week, or once a fortnight, or whatever it is. And they're not davening the same way, and they're not learning the same way, and they're not doing all of those things the same way. And they have this experience behind them. Hashem put them in this situation, and by just making themselves stop, it's ultimately going to have a huge impact on hurting everything. And if they will allow themselves to, maybe watch a movie that they're selecting intentionally, every week, every second week, every month, whatever it is, with the intention that at the end of the day, do I need it to not die? No. Being perfectly frank, do I need this to be operating in, and thriving? I do. I wish I didn't. I think it would be better if I didn't, but at the end of the day, this is where I am. And denying that to myself is gonna just ruin everything. And it's not something that's halachically prohibited. And if allowing myself to do it is gonna make everything 5 times better. And you know what? Over time, I'm gonna be very consciously aware of it and see if maybe do I feel like I can manage to not do it this week? Maybe do I feel like I can manage to not do it this time and get there in a healthy way? And maybe not get there. It's not necessarily so black and white that the person should not do it. Now again, it requires extreme caution, because one of the things that we collectively are probably best at is deluding ourselves and convincing ourselves of things when it suits our agenda. Right? And so those parts of us that really want it are going to say, come on, you have to, it's going to ruin everything, it's going to make everything better. So yes, it might require a honest, careful, really trying to weigh things up. And you know what? Sometimes we try to weigh things up and then afterwards we realize, I didn't really need that. I was kidding myself. You know what? I made an effort. I tried. I was doing what I thought was the best. Now I know better. I'm going to move forward and do the best I can next time. It still is not necessarily a bad thing. Right? So I think that the reality is that there's a lot more gray in a lot more things than a lot of people are comfortable to acknowledge. And the reality is that it might go further than that. It's exactly where you draw that line, or maybe more correctly, when you draw that line. It becomes, I would say, a very, very complex question and very individual specific. And, if there's someone who doing a particular thing, let's say, would be literally a threat to their life, obviously halacha would say don't do it, with almost no exceptions. The question is, there's literally put their life in risk right now. Then there's this sort of grayish area of have an impact that over time could really hurt someone. And, most people who hurt themselves didn't just do it on a whim out of nowhere. You know, in general, that was building up for a long time, very slowly, very gradually, because and the pressure built up and built up and built up until it got to a point that it just, you know, the pressure reached that threshold. You know, it's not so simple to know, to necessarily be in a rush to just say, oh, no, don't do that. Because I think, and it's becoming much more clear over time, just how damaging some things can be for some people. Now again, is that a blanket statement that everyone should just do whatever they feel like? No. Is it a blanket statement that everyone should just say, you know what, I think this is going to make my service of Hashem better, it's all good? No. But it does mean that things are very complex. And there's a lot to consider on both sides. Sorry if that was a little bit of an overly heavy response to your question.